Hey everyone, good morning. This is Dr. Cooper, and this is a podcast for the ENH295 Banned Books and Censorship class. Today's podcast is the Week 2 weekly podcast. So I want to check in with you all and to see how it's going and also to let you know what's in store for this week. So we're starting Module 1. So I want to go through and talk about what Module 1 is. Obviously, since I had you all go out and buy Annie on My Mind, that our first module, which will last 5 weeks, will cover Annie on My Mind and other Nancy Garden LGBT books. So we're looking at not just the LGBT books, but also teenage adult or teen lit novels that we want to look at and explore and talk about why many of these types of books are challenged for this age group. So let's go through and talk about Module 1, and then we'll look at Week 2 and the journal and the discussion that you're working on. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into the Modules tab in Canvas so we can look at the Module 1 page. So over here you'll see the orientation that we went through, and it was very important that you did the Week 1 work, which is the Lesson 1 and Lesson 1A, because you were going to write a rhetorical analysis this week. But to get the Module 1 overview, just click this link here, and it will take you into the Module 1 overview page. Alright, so in here I explain how this module is broken up into 3 modules, and that our first module will be over the Nancy Garden books. So there are a couple of things in here that talks about our network that we're going to be using Google Plus, and then it breaks down the points and the weeks and when things are due. So this is just an overview of everything that we need to do. But let's go ahead and click over into the Week 2 page, because that's where we're going to get started in Week 2. So the first thing that you're doing, as always, is you have purchased the book Annie on My Mind and you're reading the first half. Now this is a young adult novel, so it shouldn't take you very long to read the first half of the book. So that's what you're going to do for this week. There's also links to literary analysis page, literary terms handout, and then the articles that you read last week. So I'm going to extend the discussion discussion 1 a little bit further, because some of you still need to get in there and improve your grade. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, or not in this podcast, but in another podcast later. But for now, let's focus on what you need to do for Week 2. First off, there's a lesson, Lesson 2, Elements of Plot. And when you click that, it'll open in a new tab for me, and we'll take a look at that. So you need to do that lesson. So each week I'm going to give you a lesson on some rhetorical terms and elements. And as you do your journals each week, when you're asked to do a rhetorical analysis journal, like journal number 2 is, then you will need to use some of these terms that you're learning in the lessons that I'm giving you. So for instance, since the lesson is on plot this week, you might want to analyze this journal post using plot. So you're going to read Annie on My Mind, and then you're going to write, or you're going to choose a literary tool or rhetorical strategy from the literary terms handout, or you can use the literary analysis questions. These are the EQs that I'll be talking about in a second. But you can use either one to choose what you want to analyze this work based on. Just be careful that if you choose a question, that not all questions apply to every piece of literature that we read. So you can't just pick any question. Also, when you choose a question, it's difficult for you to apply the SOAPs, S-O-A-P-S, that is required for your journal post. It's possible, but a lot of times students skip that because they're answering a question. So make sure that you can implement your SOAPs even though you're using a question. So as always, you're going to go over to the community to post your journal post. Okay, so you just click in the box here and you write your post here. So I'm going to go ahead and click in write. Oops, not really write anything, write post. And then you want to make sure that when you click in the to box that you choose the right category. So if it's a journal, go ahead and click the journal. If you're doing discussion, then it will be in whatever module we're in. In this case, Discussion 1A is Module 1, Nancy Garden books. But for this post, it's just a journal. So I'm going to hit Journal. And then I want to make sure that I tag my journal. So this would be journal number 2. So I need my pound sign and then journal number 2. And then I can share that post. Okay, I'm not going to share that. But you can see below that people in our class have already started to share. So that's one of the things that we're working on. Now the second thing we're working on is our journal. Okay, so we also need to do discussion 1A. Now, discussion 1A is going to be our first discussion on the Google Plus community. It's different than a journal because in this case, the discussion requires that you work back and forth with each other in a discussion, where journals are more your ideas and we may or may not comment on them as a class, but discussions you will. So one of the things that we're going to do, obviously you have to read the first part of your book, but you're also going to look at some of the essential questions that you can ask. Again, not all essential questions will be related to every book, so choose wisely. And then once you click here, now these links weren't working before, but they are now. So you can click through and get to the discussion area. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the questions first, and then we'll go back over to Google+. So these are the questions, and you can choose one of these questions. Now only the first 8 people to ask a question those are the only questions that we're going to answer. So make sure that you look for all of the questions first before you write your own question. If you don't get a chance to ask a question, then what you will do is answer the questions. Okay? So when we go back over to here, you will see that Michelle has offered a question. Now she's going to fix this, but this is not journal number 2. This is a question. And this is the second question that has been asked. What techniques did the author use to get her point across? And then the first question was right here. And this one's good to go. Discussion 1A. Annie on my mind, analysis question. How does the title of the book relate to the book itself? So we need 6 more questions that students get to ask, and if you don't get a chance to ask an EQ question, you'll get a chance in the future. Remember, if you can't ask one of the 8 questions, then you're responsible for answering the questions. You don't have to answer all 8 because we're doing a discussion, but you need to answer at least 3 and then reply back to each other when someone else replies. Okay, so we'll talk more about that discussion once we get the 8 questions, but right now we have 2. Michelle's question and um, Cynthia's question. Now, how do you find the questions without having to scroll through? Just go ahead and go into the Module 1 Nancy Garden books. And in this area, you should only see questions. Okay, so remember, Michelle's working on reorganizing her question, and it will show up in here as soon as she's done. So if you're ready to come in to participate in a discussion 1A, go ahead and click on Module 1 Nancy Garden books, and this is where the questions will be. If there are only 1 question, 2 questions, then you can ask a question. Go ahead and click the box. You will already be in the Module 1 Nancy Garden Books area. Just ask the question. Okay? And then we will be able to see that there are 8 questions, and we can start to participate by answering these questions. So that's pretty much it for the discussions, for the discussion for this week. So if you did not get full credit on discussion 1, I will allow for you to participate further in that discussion. I'll be grading those later today. And then this discussion 2 and your journal number 2, or excuse me, this discussion 1A on Annie on My Mind and journal number 2 are due by the end of this week, Sunday. Now remember, in order to do a good journal, you need to make sure you do lessons 1 and 1A first. All right, that's it for now. More later.